And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you. Bobby Akart with us. We're talking about his trilogy books, ARkStorm, Fractured, and Mammoth. Bobby, how do we handle this? We can't leave coastal cities. We can't stick our heads in the ground and hide. What do we do?
Well, the best thing you can do is be aware. Situational awareness is a very important part of preventing yourself from being harmed in just any scenario. Nowadays, George, as you read in the news, it's not safe to be in a mall. It's not safe to be walking down a sidewalk in some occasions.
That's right.
So those things are important to your daily lives, but also to be aware of what the worst-case scenarios are, the types of things that I write about, so that you can take action before the 99% of people who are unaware take that same action. And going back to the pandemic, and we talked about this a little bit in 2020, the moment that you saw that this virus had jumped the ocean and was on the West Coast, that was the moment you needed to make sure that you had all the necessary food and supplies to ride out a period of when we couldn't get the grocery stores restocked. Waiting until everybody knows about the scenario that could unfold is too late. And so one of the purposes of my novels is to show people what these events are in various levels of catastrophes, from extinction level down to earthquakes, and then say, through the character's eyes, here's what you can do to protect yourselves if this happens in your community or it happens to the United States, whether it be a naturally occurring event or something that's man-made between hostile nations.
Well, yeah, and there's a lot of common sense involved here too, isn't there?
Well, there is, because preparedness involves making sure that you have a good shelter, making sure that you have ample fresh water, food, medications, things of that sort, because when the shelves run dry or if the power grid goes down, one of the big problems, for example, is dysentery. People think that they can just drink water out of a creek bed, not realizing it's full of bacteria that's going to cause you all kinds of gastrointestinal problems, which will then exacerbate the dysentery, and then you'll end up dying. So knowing how to store water, knowing how to purify water, and how to find fresh water is something that everybody should know. And recently, I think it was Flint, Michigan, in the last couple of years, when they had to shut down the water supply because it had been contaminated, and that went on for a long time. Those people really suffered.
Yeah, they did. They had lead, right? It was a lead issue.
Yes, it was a lead issue, and so that is just an everyday potential occurrence. But now imagine if an electromagnetic pulse, an EMP, whether from a solar flare or from a North Korean nuke, causes our electric grid to go down, then the power plants and the water treatment plants will not operate.
That's right.
Which means you have to go stay hydrated somehow. And so just knowing the basics of preparedness is something I try to teach through the characters that I write without being so obvious as to what I'm doing. And I think readers pick up on that and appreciate it.
To the phones now we go. Mark in Baltimore, Maryland, to get us started. Hi, Mark. Go ahead.
Thank you very, very much. And Mr. Akart, you're doing a terrific job out there. Mr. Norrie pretty much asked my question. I'll ask it again, and maybe you could expand on it a little bit. I'm a veteran, so I have some experience with the government and prepping, and that's what I do. I'm not obsessed with prepping, but I do it. Here's my question, sir. Is or are our world's governments or the United Nations of the world, are they aware of these disaster scenarios that you write about in your terrific books? And what, if anything, are they doing to prepare humanity for them? Are our governments doing anything, in addition, to the FEMA and all that, and the public raising awareness? Is our government, or can they do anything else to help us out here?
Well, Mark, thanks for calling in. And first, let me tell you, from my perspective, I'm an unapologetic prepper. You get the sense that the media has taken every opportunity they can to associate someone into preparedness with some type of doomsday cult scenario, and anytime they can. You see the news, the mainstream media, how it is, but I feel like it's my duty as a husband and as fathers out there or mothers to take care of my family by making sure we're able to survive a catastrophic event, whether it be a hurricane or something much worse. And so preparedness is my civic duty, not only to my family, but it's also my duty to law enforcement and first responders. I am an able-bodied man capable of taking care of myself. I should not be burdening them when they need to take care of the old and children who can't take care of themselves. So let me just say that as a blanket statement. So good for you, and as a vet, you've seen a lot, so you understand what it's like in some places where people don't have the ability to prepare like we do here. Now, to go to the next step about governments and et cetera, they have a tendency to downplay the threats. Now, I don't know if they believe that they're doing the population, the citizenry, a favor by not creating some kind of frightening situation, but I think the pandemic taught everyone that you should have basic preparedness supplies in the event of something like a pandemic, whether it be the proper masks or hygiene materials and et cetera. And we all learned from that, and I think many people have taken that step. But in America, I believe the government does a lot of things to make us dependent upon them. They make FEMA out to be the solution to the problems, and it's a very poorly run operation that's often slow to respond. And I'm going to go to the Maui situation, if I could, real quick. That is a perfect example of government's failure to deal with a catastrophe.
Yep.
People died because they did not act properly.
And they're still finding bodies, Bobby.
It's tragic, George. And yes, this wildfire occurred, and the wind supported the blowing across the island, but they failed on every single level to not only warn people, but also to give them advice on what to do when this occurred. And there's no excuse, because we all know what these potential threats are. Government doesn't make it a priority, which is what their number one job is to protect the citizens.
We're taking calls with Bobby Akart this hour. Let's go to Bob in Indiana, east of the Rockies. Hey, Bob, go ahead.
Hi, George. Thank you for taking my call.
Oh, you're welcome, sir. Thank
Bobby,
you.
Thank you for writing the books on the earthquakes, especially the New Madrid. I live close enough. I checked out a library book after we were hit in about 15, 18 years ago. It was centered in South Central Illinois, and it was only about a 5.5 magnitude. But it was really something to experience. It just sounded like thunder that went on miles and miles after, the initial boom. But I checked out a library book, and that library book said 75% of the earthquakes happened between October 1st and April 1st. No explanation. Just wondering if you've heard anything like that. And while I'm thinking of it, the main reason I called, are any of your books on Audible? I lost my vision about 2 years ago.
Yeah, he was talking about that. Go ahead, Bobby.
Yeah. Hi. I've always wanted to say this, George, so indulge me. Hi, Bob. Anybody watch the Newhart show back in the day? It's a thing, Hi, Bob. Listen, I appreciate you calling in. Let me address the audiobooks first. All of my novels, including the nonfiction series that I wrote, which deals with EMP, cyber warfare, and economic collapse, are all available on audiobooks through Audible. I would like to give you a book, Bob, if you will just have someone email me, or if you can email me at bobbyakart@gmail.com. Kind of tell me what your interests are, and I will send you some codes so you can listen to some of my audiobooks, okay?
Well, we'll do that. Absolutely.
Okay, so New Madrid was a way to illustrate a catastrophic event that can occur in this country that people are unaware of. Very few people, unless you live in the St. Louis region, are aware of the New Madrid seismic zone. And so I wanted to write stories that take these relatively obscure events in history and bring them into modern times. And so by writing New Madrid, it raised awareness of the quake potential and how it could cause commerce between, across America to come to a standstill when things like bridges went out and heck, you've got all kinds of underground power lines and transmission lines that traverse the Mississippi River that would be damaged by this catastrophic event.
What year did they have the Mississippi go backwards from an earthquake?
Well, the quake sequence started in late 1811, December, and went into 1812 with aftershocks. I mean, we're talking magnitude 7, magnitude 8 earthquakes. So it has been over 200 years. But see, this is just an example. Just because it was 212 years ago and because we now live in this great technologically advanced society doesn't mean New Madrid can't raise its ugly head again.
That's
right. It can happen any time.
Any time, without notice.
To reference his issue about the time of year, they call them ice quakes. Water infiltrates the seismic zone underneath the crust, into the Earth's crust. Water goes into the crust. Very cold weather can cause that water to freeze, and therefore it expands, which then upsets the geologic apple cart, so to speak. And that was the basis of ARkStorm, Fractured, and Mammoth. When the ARkStorm occurred again, with all of this water dumped onto California, the massive weight and the sheer volume started seeping into the seismic zones like San Andreas, Garlock, etc. That had a profound effect on the geologic system, creating and triggering earthquakes.
Let's go to Cornelius in Alexandria, Louisiana. Hello there, Cornelius.
Hey there, George and Bob. And I was just telling Tommy, boy, it's so good to hear y'all's voice. And I wish this was a 4-hour show because Castle and Austin Spitz was a good show. I tried to get in then. I don't know if you ever heard of me, Bob. I'm the God Guns and Gold man, the Bible Bullets and Beans man. And from a biblical perspective, I look at things like they talk about a great quake in the Bible and all like that, and hailstones as big as 100 pounds and all like that. So I think the mark of the beast is coming first. They'll need all this technology. If you look at AI, which I call it Antichrist intelligence, and you look at the aliens that are coming out with the military finally admitting that the aliens are here. So I think we're in trouble that way. So have you written anything, or will you write anything about an alien deception, which would be fallen angels or the artificial intelligence? God bless you, George. God bless everybody. I hope Mike and on the Big Island is fine and everything, and I hope the people in Florida be fine.
Thank you, Cornelius. Our listeners care about other listeners here, Bobby. It's amazing.
Yes, and that's good. It's a community, and I've known that, and this is why I really, truly appreciate you having me on, George. And Cornelius raises a great point. When you and I first spoke on the radio together in 2015, we discussed in general terms about UFOs and possibly extraterrestrials. At the time, like so many others, we hadn't seen the proof. And there are people, if you haven't seen it for themselves, you can't believe it. Well, we now know, finally. I mean, it's like pulling teeth, right? Our government has hidden actual footage, actual reports and interviews with respected Navy pilots, Air Force pilots, who have seen these phenomenal, unexplained aircraft. And this goes back to what Mark was talking about. And Bob, they understand that the government thinks they're protecting us because they assume that the population will freak out if they knew there were actually aliens who have inhabited or visited the Earth in these extravagant aircraft. And my opinion is full transparency is always the best. Let us deal with it in our own way. But by not telling us when something does in fact happen, then we all, as a population, will in fact freak out. And so I have not yet written a book about ETs, for example, or something to that effect, because in the past I had that doubt in my mind that it wasn't scientifically plausible. Now I know. Now I know it's plausible, and so that has to be on my future to be written list.
Bobby, how long does it take you to write a book? I mean, they're huge.
Yeah, and listen, I am very fortunate. God has blessed me with a talent that enables me to conjure up these stories, but I spend a lot of time on research and discussing this with others. I write very fast, George, shockingly fast. It's almost as if I hate to admit it, but there are years that I've written 10 novels in a single year.
That's amazing.
It's because I have, number one, the passion to do it, and because I love what I do. But secondly, I have a wife that carries the entire load. Danny does everything for me, and so I don't have to worry about the day-to-day things. I can simply go up into my study and close the world out and bang away on that keyboard.
We're going to take calls next half hour with Bobby Akart as well, as we're talking about his latest works, ARkStorm, Fractured, and Mammoth. What's your latest program? What are you working on next?
Well, the next novel to come out is going to be in mid-November, called Made in China. And it's very interesting, George.
Oh, boy.
I want you to think about this. Every single electric power grid component comes from China. They could be full of Trojan horses, as people would refer to them, where the Chinese could turn on and turn off all of our devices with a flip of a switch. And so when you think about the fact that our entire grid is dependent upon replacing these massive transformers with their equipment, you realize that they've got us by, as they say, by the warm and fuzzies.
Absolutely. Remember that song, Slow Boat to China?
Yes, sir.
It used to sound so great. Now when you listen to it, I played it last week as a bumper song, but now when you listen to it, it kind of gives you the willies.
It sure does. And Made in China will give people the willies, too. It'll make them think twice about those fancy devices on their counter that turn on and off your television.
Can people get to Facebook, Twitter, X, and Instagram off your website?
Yeah, everything is on BobbyAkart.com. Pretty much just type in Bobby Akart into any search engine, and it all shows up for you.
All right, those of you on hold, we'll get to you when we come back after the break, and the phone lines are open for a couple lines, so you make the call. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie back with our final segment with Bobby Akart. Bobby, of all the scenarios we've talked about, which one do you think is the most possible, if not all of them?
Well, yeah, the thing is they're all possible because they've happened before and they're scientifically plausible. The question is, which is the most likely to occur in our lifetimes is the way I like to look at it. And I definitely go back to the possibility of a solar flare with a, strong enough to have the EMP effect, as well as an asteroid near-Earth object striking the planet. That's on the natural disaster side. On the man-made disaster side, without question, we're in a world that's full of nuclear weapons, with people who aren't very smart, who would like to make a splash on the world stage, prepared to push that button. The threat of nuclear winter is not that different from the impact a Yellowstone supervolcano would have on our atmosphere in terms of the amount of dust and ash thrown into the air, as well as the clouds that would be created, cooling temperatures, causing, think about our great Midwest and the amount of food produced there. That would all change if temperatures were to drop 4 to 5 degrees on average.
Yeah.
It would be devastating for world population who would die of hunger.
Let's go to the phones west of the Rockies. Craig is with us in Vancouver, British Columbia. Craig, thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Hi, George. Great to talk to you.
Thank you.
I always see you on the Ancient Aliens. Great shows. Hi, Bobby.
Hi, Craig.
I just had a quick question about the geomagnetic storms, the solar flares that you mentioned. What do you think of a Fermi box? And do we have any kind of an early warning system for that, or is it possible? Or You only have 8 minutes to pop our cell phones into a microwave.
But people have tried that, and the key to protecting yourself. First off, solar flares are tracked. I mean, we have the best available satellites going around the sun, notifying us back on Earth when a major sunspot has occurred, when it's going to rotate back into view, and when it emits this destructive plasma. One of the first novels I wrote was titled 36 Hours, and that was based upon the research that we would have approximately 36 hours from the time we were notified or made aware of this major solar flare until it actually hit the planet. And then you can imagine what would happen in that 36-hour time frame. So on the naturally occurring side, we would have some time to prepare. Now, the extent of getting ready for such a catastrophic event is based upon your level of preparedness. Sure, you could put your cell phone in a microwave and it might protect it from the harmful ionosphere and ions floating through the atmosphere, but it won't matter because the cell towers will be destroyed. So really, probably what you need to do is focus on what are the life-sustaining measures that you would take. In my opinion, you should always prepare for a grid-down scenario, meaning the power grid is taken offline, either from a solar flare, it could be from a cyber attack. I mean, our country is inundated with attempts by all kinds of bad actors to take down our critical infrastructure, electricity, water, banking, anything you can imagine that's the heartbeat of America. And again, this could happen while we're on this call right now, while we're in the middle of this program. Someone in Russia or a team of the People's Liberation Army in China could take down our power grid, and we would be thrown into the 1800s technology-wise.
And we would take down theirs as well, Bobby.
Yeah, if we had the ability to respond. See, they know more about us than we know about them. I mean, okay, they send these weather balloons over with all of their, technology up there to spy on us, and we just kind of let them go by. But they have far better means of hacking into our military and our Pentagon, gaining these technological secrets, and they do it all day. They have an entire unit dedicated to just that purpose. And so they are, in the spy game, they are way ahead of us.
Why can't this planet just get along, huh?
I know it's nature of mankind. Going back to the beginning, if you want, we've always warred with one another. It's just the wars have gone from sticks and stones to bombs.
Next up, let's go to David in Santa Cruz, California. Hey, David, welcome.
How about that? Hi, Bobby. Hi, George.
Hey there.
Long-time listener, first-time caller. I remember tuning in to Art Bell back in 2000 and listening to Melvin Morse. I was just thinking about what you were talking about, Bobby. And I wanted to say I've been trying to raise awareness about the vaquita, which is an endangered species which could suffer extinction. And I've been writing and I've been calling. I even called or wrote to Antonio Manuel Lopez Obrador because these little porpoises are impacted by the sixth grade biological extinction. And I have also read so many books about, EMP, and I follow the show each night. I read One Day After by William Forstchen, the book version of The Postman by David Brin, and Kim Stanley Robinson did several California novels and, had characters surviving atop a destroyed freeway interchange that was flooded out underneath. And so I'm going to look for your books, and I just had to say that, it's a critical time for the vaquita because there are only about 200 or fewer left, and right now, the federal government is supposed to make a decision about embargoing Mexican shrimp because it's the gill netting in the Gulf of California that's driving this species extinct. So there's several others. There are species far away, but I've been down there to Mexicali, and so it's sort of personal to me. They should raise the river level in the Colorado River, and just protect the few remaining endangered species in that area.
Good
So
points,
I don't have a question, but I will listen to the rest of the show off of the air. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, my friend. He's right there, Bobby.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you talk about extinction level events, there are some species that become extinct because of various factors, and there's been a honeybee issue for a long time.
Sure.
Honeybees are so critical to our survival, and people don't realize this. And whether it be from problems with pollination, or you might recall the murder hornet scenario where these vicious hornets came out of Mexico up into the western United States.
The killer wasps.
They were killer wasps, and so all of these issues are very important, and it's really a matter of everyone being aware of this, and that we take the proper actions both on a governmental level, but also on a personal level to know what you should do to prepare for the worst case.
Michael in St. Louis. Hey, Michael, go ahead, sir.
How you doing, George? I have to agree with Bob about the EMPs and meteor hitting Earth, but I have an article that I took out of the Parade magazine that was in the Globe Democrat that was America's greatest earthquake. Now, I'll paraphrase just a few things about that. It happened on December 16th in 1811, and as you indicated, it rolled the Mississippi backwards, recoursed it. It created what they called earthquake Christians, spewed sulfurous vapor into the air where it caused total darkness. It chimney fell 400 miles away in Cincinnati, and over the next 3 months, scientists recorded with the Richter scale 1,870 earthquakes.
Wow!
9 of which were severe. He indicated that were severe. Now, on one final note, my son is working with a professor at the Shaw's Botanical Garden here in St. Louis, and he is studying with the bees. That, in my opinion, and I think Bobby will probably agree, and most people, that is our number one source of survival for pretty much the whole planet, not just the human species, but specifically the human species at this point. So that's pretty much what I have to say. You've always had the greatest guest, George. It's always great. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you, Michael.
And, Bobby, you're wonderful, and can't wait to read some of your books.
He just echoed what you said about the honeybees.
Yeah, and I'm glad he noticed. And see, these are the kinds of stories that don't attract people's attention. Everybody looks for the drama, and in the media business, sometimes, George, they say if it bleeds, it leads.
Yep.
But sometimes what you need to look for are the stories that are buried deep, maybe online somewhere, like the honeybee scenario, that people need to be aware of.
Let's go east. Joe's with us in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Hey, Joseph, go ahead.
Hey, Bob and George, thanks for taking my call.
Thank you, Joe.
Well, I didn't think I'd ever get through. I just might go out and get an easy pick on the Mega Lotto tonight.
Go for it.
But anyway, I was wondering if the caldera were to go off at Yellowstone, could that possibly set off the Andreas fault line, or vice versa, the Andreas fault line set off the caldera? And Bobby, what do you think is the main reason that our government refuses to do anything about, enforcing our grid when it's their number one priority is to protect us, the citizens? I just don't get it.
Well, and I agree with you there, Joe, and I'll go back to the first part of your question in a second, but it's always about how to spend the money, who controls spending the money in Washington. And it goes back and forth. For a while, one party has the power, and for a while, the other party has the power. But nobody's interested in saying to their constituents, hey, I just spent $100 billion of taxpayer dollars to harden the wiring on our electric grid. People would say, well, what are you going to do for me? It's not sexy, you know what I mean? But yet it's absolutely necessary, and until we have a major power outage, and we almost had one in 1989 with Quebec and later in the early 90s in New York City, we've had a taste of this, but people expect that the power is going to come back on. But what happens when it doesn't come back on? There will be that event when the power does not come back on, and that's when society will collapse. And we see what societal collapse. We are witnessing this every single day in the news.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, but to go back to the first part of his question, if Yellowstone's caldera were to erupt, as it has in the past, it wouldn't matter what happened at San Andreas. That would be the least of our problems. But vice versa, a massive earthquake along San Andreas would not probably have any form of impact on Yellowstone because it's just too far away.
Is Yellowstone a mass extinction event?
Yes. And here's why. And earthquake or supervolcanoes have caused this in the past, Toba and some of the others, because of the amount of volume of ash and poisonous gas, sulfuric dioxide, carbon dioxide. It's flushed into the atmosphere. It immediately enters the atmosphere. Prevailing winds will then transport it all the way across the northern hemisphere, and it's a question of, not how many people will die, because it would be registered in the millions, but it's how quickly they would die. Some might die immediately that are within the blast zone of the caldera. Others will die shortly thereafter. These fine particles of ash, silica, will invade your lungs and cause you to trouble breathing, and it cause cancers. And we've already talked about the food supply. We've talked about water being poisoned by this type of eruptive material. So, yes, Yellowstone would be a mass extinction event. Now, some argue that it would be, confined to the northern hemisphere, and I have written about this in Yellowstone, the series that I wrote, the 4-book series, that they call it the coffee latitudes between the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. That in that central part of the world, along between the two tropics, you might be immune from the effects of a supervolcano like Yellowstone, but the people in the northern hemisphere would suffer around the globe.
Bobby, it's incredible what's happening on this planet these days, isn't it?
Well, nothing surprises me anymore, to be honest, George. And I guess that's what I do. I mean, I try to look at all of the various scenarios, the threats that we as a population would, real true threats that could end our lives and end, the world as we know it. And I write these stories to bring awareness. And the thing is, people say, well, Bobby, are you ever going to run out of things to write about? I could write until I'm older and grayer and still not cover all the potential threats that we face.
Exactly. Bobby, keep in touch. Come on back, okay?
We sure will. Thank you very much, George.
Bobby Akart. Up next, we're going to talk about the paranormal as we take a walk on the supernatural side of life right here on Coast to Coast AM.